Well, here we are. I said that I was going to be talking about 7 November 2010 albums in this series, and now we are at the final November 2010 album of 10 Years Later. I didn't think I'd actually be able to do it, but here we are. So with that being said, welcome back to 10 Years Later, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. And as you can tell from the title, the album that we will be talking about today is the 2010 Flo Rida album, Only One Flo Part 1. Flo Rida is a rapper, singer, and songwriter from, yep, you guessed it, Arkansas. No, but obviously, yeah, he's from Florida. Flo Rida broke out in 2007 with his huge hit song Low with T-Pain, which was #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 10 consecutive weeks. And he continued to grab massive hits with tracks like Elevator, In the Air, Right Round, and Sugar, among several others. This was his third studio album, but despite his huge commercial prominence in singles, it was his lowest charting record on the Billboard 200, as it landed all the way down at 107th. Hey, maybe that's why there was never an Only One Flo Part 2, right? Okay, I'll stop. But honestly, it's weird that a guy that prominent on the radio had a commercial release land with such a thud. What's weirder is that this is hardly an album. At 8 tracks and 27 minutes, this feels more like a glorified EP. But is it clear through the music why this album did so poorly? Well, I mean, it's not bad, but I guess that title came true because it really sounds like he has only one flow on the album. The weird thing about it though is that none of it is really bad enough to annoy me or get me angry. It's pretty consistent, but it's consistently plain. There's not much to it that's really all that special, and while there aren't really lows on the album, there aren't that many highs on here either. The one single I remember listening to a lot when I was younger was Club Can't Handle Me. Ironically, despite this album being stuck in homeostasis, this track miraculously doesn't blend in with everything else, and it actually manages to remain the excellent banger it's been for years. David Guetta's production maintains that energetic vibe of the other tracks here, but manages to have a bit more punch to make it more memorable, and the song really succeeds thanks to how excellent the hook is. Flo Rida and uncredited guest vocalist Nicole Scherzinger tap into something extremely catchy with it, and it honestly sells the song on its own. The other two singles weren't nearly as successful, the first of them being Turn Around 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's extremely spendy with a lot of the electro vibes that were so big back in 2010, and while it's far from being a bad track, what really holds it back is how boring the chorus is. Usually what makes Flo Rida appealing is that he can occasionally craft a catchy hook that gets stuck in your head, but this one just feels like it goes in one ear and out the other. The other single is Who Dat Girl with Akon, which is yet another electronic track that follows that same exact chord progression of every song that was popular in 2010. Seriously, just listen to it once and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Come on, tell me that doesn't sound something like, I don't know, California Girls by Katy Perry. Other than that, the song doesn't do anything all that interesting outside of maybe Akon's vocals on the chorus. When it comes to the deep cuts, yeah, they're mostly pretty unexciting. On and On leads off the album and features Mr. Kevin Rudolph, because hey, can't be 2010 without Flo Rida and Kevin Rudolph. The song sounds like a lot of the poppy Flo Rida hits of yesteryear, just with some production that feels a bit more led by some auxiliary percussion. Flo Rida's performance is fine, though it does seem a bit goofy when he tries to self-censor his cursing. I guess he just doesn't curse, but it just sounds silly. Kevin Rudolph's hook is fine, but it's nothing all that special either. Come With Me feels more emotional with a few more ethereal moments on the production and a more sing-rap style from Flo. It's not the greatest singing ever, but it works decently for the song, and I do like some of the more lovely lyrics as well. 21 features reggae singer Laza Morgan, and while Laza sounds decent on the chorus when he's able to fight through the auto-tune, this is another song that really exposes Flo Rida's lack of range in terms of production choices. You could probably isolate this beat, sit it next to about 6 or 7 other Flo Rida instrumentals, and I would tell you they were all the same track. Respirator also exposes that to me. To be honest, the song started and I thought I was listening to Somebody to Love by Justin Bieber. When it moves away from that, it just again goes in the same standard direction that every other Flo Rida track goes in. Obviously, his style doesn't change here, nor does it really change on the rest of the record. And the closer, Why You Up In Here, is a huge posse cut featuring Get Fresh, Ludacris, and Gucci Mane. I guess I could give this song points for being the least poppy sounding track here, but sadly, the production doesn't really make Flo Rida's performance much more interesting. In a lot of ways, he makes other artists on the song sound out of place. He goes relatively hard and fast with his cadence to the point where, for example, Gucci Mane's slower flow doesn't juxtapose it as nicely. Really what lifts the song is Get Fresh's smooth hook and Ludacris's charismatic verse, but otherwise, it's not quite as interesting as it could have been. Overall, I feel like my thoughts on this Flo Rida album are confusing. I think it's mostly because I've never been so indifferent about about an album in my life. For much of my time listening, I really felt like I had no opinion on it and I was just drawing a complete blank. I was able to scrounge together enough energy to give an opinion, and that opinion is, it's there. There's very little to say about it, and honestly, I obviously don't know now how this video will come out, but I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being one of my shortest videos yet, simply because there's so little to say about the record. In terms of performance and production, Flo Rida is the equivalent of Stoop Kid from Hey Arnold. Stoop Kid was afraid to leave his stoop and do something different, and Flo Rida felt like he was in the same boat here. He didn't do anything that would remotely classify as a stylistic risk, and because of that, you can kind of see why people lost interest. That said though, while that might seem like it's cause for me to give a scathing review, I honestly can't, because the music here didn't do enough to frustrate me, bore me, or get me upset. Across the board, everything about it was pretty average. It kind of just checked off the necessary boxes without doing much in the way of providing wow factor. And yes, I know there are some artists who make music so bog standard that it's horrible. Hi Nav, how's it going? But honestly, Flo's album never hits the horrible mark. None of it even really reaches the bad mark. Honestly, the record is kind of boring. And not in the sense that the music is boring, but because it's kind of boring to talk about. It's not nearly good enough to the point where I want to wax poetic about how game-changing it is, but it's not nearly bad enough for me to want to rip to shreds. It's just there. It exists, and therefore it is. And that's about the most I could really say to sum up the album. Back in 2010, I liked Club Can't Handle Me, but didn't know Flo Rida enough to tell if I would have liked the album or not. Listening to it now, as I said, it's hard to honestly give an opinion on it. I guess I'm just mostly indifferent. If I had to put it on my scale, I guess it'd get an okay rating. If I had an indifferent rating, maybe it would get that. It's honestly just kind of there. Not good enough to return to consistently, not bad enough to get angry, upset, or frustrated with. It's just kind of there, taking up space, not hurting anyone. It's the equivalent of the last player on a sports team's roster. They don't really excel in one area, they don't suck in any area, they're just filling a roster spot. That's probably the easiest way to sum up this album. But that's just my opinion on the record, of course. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back in 2010? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it then, hate it then, love it now, hate it now? What are your overall opinions on Flo Rida, if you happen to have any? Whatever they are, leave them down in the comment section. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. If you guys want to support my passion for content creation and subscribe to my OnlyFans where I make exclusive music review and poetry content for $4.99 a month, the link to that is in the description. Of course, it's totally okay if you can't or don't want to. I totally understand and I appreciate anyone that is able to. And believe it or not, the next record that I talk about on 10 Years Later is going to be the last 2010 album that I discuss in this series. I am going to film it back to back with this video just because since December looks like it's going to be a busy month for me, I want to be able to have it just done and out of the way, so you will get the video a bit early. But the next 10 Years Later video is going to be the posthumous Michael Jackson album, Michael. And like I said, that'll be my last episode of 10 Years Later for 2020. So stay tuned for that. But until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.